Hi there, time for another video. Now recently on the VC I've noticed a thread going around, and it's relating to the most played albums in your collection. Now of course this is always a tricky one because it's relying on old memory, and I must admit when I sort of thought about this, bearing in mind that I'm 69 and my listening to music career commenced over 50 years ago, 55 years ago to be precise, it was a pretty daunting task to try and think in terms of the number of albums that I've listened to in that period and what might have been played more than others. It's pretty easy to perhaps target your favourites, but your favourites aren't necessarily the ones that you played the most. And also what's significant, I found, is that it depends on what year you're talking about, because obviously as the years pass, new releases come about and they often catch your ear and you play them a lot for a short period of time, possibly just in that year or even 2 or 3 years. And so they rake up quite a number of listens, but they don't last because we are constantly moving on to new years. So with that intro, what I'm going to try to do now is I actually took a spreadsheet out at the beginning of the millennium, and I was actually ticking off on a sort of daily basis the musical albums that I was listening to, and then at the end of the year I collated the information and came up with a sort of top 20. Well, I'm not going to bore you with top 20 here, but what I am going to do is I've referred to this recently, and I was quite surprised really at some of the albums that I spent quite a lot of time listening to. As I say, I started doing this in 2000, and I'm going to do 10 years, and hopefully it won't be too long a video. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the albums that I did decide to listen. I'm just going to list them out so you get a flavour of how tastes change as you progress through your listening musical career, and they do change quite drastically. There were quite a few surprises in my statistics, and so I'm going to get started with these and go through from the new millennium 2000 to 2010. Okay, now I have actually got some information on a paper in front of me to refer to, because recalling all this information on memory is quite difficult. But anyway, I'm going to get started, and I'll probably choose 3 or 4 albums from each year just to go through them. Let's start with 2000 or 2000, and I've selected 4 here. And fourth in the roll of honour was an album called FIFA by the Benin diva Angelique Kidjo. This really sort of signalled really my increased interest in African music, and this one, which I got on CD, was a classic. Got 19 listens on that year. Next up was number 3, and this was Midnight Vultures by Beck. Again, Beck had become an artist that I really enjoyed at the end of the 1990s, and it continued into the new millennium. 20 listens for Midnight Vultures, and of course the couple of tracks owed quite a resemblance to one artist called Prince, which also appealed to me considerably. Runner-up that year was surprisingly Mad Season by Matchbox 20. I got into this band really after Rod Thomas the lead singer and the composer of some of these songs, after he appeared on Supernatural, the hugely successful Santana album. So I gave this band a go. They were a sort of rock pop album. Rock pop band. Weren't too heavy, very pop-like, with a touch of rock music. And the winner for 2000 was Performance and Cocktails by the Welsh band Stereophonics. I didn't get to hear the first album, but this follow-up really hit me, and I couldn't stop playing it. And it actually got 25 listens on that year. So that summarizes the sort of first year, and I'm going to do this video in probably in two. So I'm going to go from 2000 to 2004, and then finish off the second part of the decade in a separate video. So 2001 then, I've got 5 down here, and my 5th choice was the debut album by an American soul singer. Her name was Macy Gray, and her album On How Life Is came in with 15 listens, and the single, the title escapes me a little bit, Try I think it was called, was a cracker. Next up, which was my 4th popular album, was a various artist album from the African continent. It was a rough guide to music from Senegal and Gambia. I had actually visited Gambia a few years before, and so this one caught my eye, this CD, and I played it 16 times. Then the next one was another Macy Gray album. It was the follow-up to On How Life Is, and it was called The Id, and I played that 17 times. She had a very unique type of voice. Of course, she was very much influenced by soul and Tamla, but she had that unique style, so to speak. Runner-up that year was an album called Reptile by Eric Clapton. I've always been a lover of Clapton through the years, and I particularly like this one, which he released in 2001. 17 listens for that. And then, perhaps not much of a surprise, 2001, Top Notch, was the follow-up to Performance and Cocktails by the Stereophonics. It was called Just Enough Education to Perform. A couple of really hot singles on this, and I played this 26 times. So that's 2001. Quickly moving on to 2002. Again, I've got 5 choices here, and in 5th place was 2 albums actually. The first one, Amnesiac by Radiohead. I really got into this one far more than Kid A, and I used to play a lot in the car, and the electronic sort of rock style really caught to me, and I really enjoyed the vocal delivery by Tom York. It was joint 5th, however, with an album by Oasis called Heathen Chemistry. Now, as the years have passed on, I can't for the life of me work out why I wanted to listen to this so frequently, but this is how this sort of evolves. It was certainly not their best album, probably not their worst, but anyway, it slotted in there at 5, joint 5. At 3, I was back into African music, and I listened to an album by Salif Keita from Mali called Folon, and that was a tremendous experience listening to particularly the vocals and the harmony vocals by a spread of beautifully sang female singers from Mali. Runner up, another African here, And this is was Black Ivory Soul, once again by the Benin diva Angelica Kidjo. 23 listens that year for this beautiful CD that I actually got from my sister, who made a visit that year. She brought it over from England. Couldn't get it over here in Thailand. But at the top of the pops on 2002 was an album by No Doubt, the sort of rock reggae ska band fronted by Gwen Stefani, and the album was titled Rock Steady. So many great pop songs on this, and they were very easy to sing along to, and so that was my top choice for 2002. Moving on to 2003, this was the year, well, I'll get to the number one in a minute, but again, 4 choices here, and at number 4 was the previously mentioned Black Ivory Soul by Angelique Kidjo. It was such a great album that it moved into a second year, and that was had like 11 plays. And then surprisingly, and this was a big surprise for me, in third place was a jazz album by Miles Davis and Gil Evans. It was a best of compilation, and I managed to get it on the sort of player Winamp 12 times. Runner up that year was the new album by Peter Gabriel called Up. Got 14 listens to that. Big fan of Gabriel, had been throughout his Genesis career and into his solo career. And I think this was his 6th album. I stand corrected on that. Perhaps listeners can correct me on that. Really solid album. The tracks were all sort of 4.5 to 5 minutes plus, and a very sort of mix of that sort of world music style with his progressive rock origins, and tremendous voice. Winner that year, and this was the first album that I really fell in love with, by the American artist from Alabama, the guitar and singer-songwriter John Mayer, and it was his Room for Squares. This was reissued, originally released it a year before as titled Inside Out, but when it came round again, repackaged, I grabbed it, and it was on in the car, the cassette version, throughout really. 25 listens for that year. I'm going to now wrap this video up by having a look at 2004, and again here 5 offerings. In 5th place was Steely Dan's Aja, which managed to get 11 listens, and it was alongside 11 listens by the purple one, Mr. Prince, and his latest album, Musicology, which I really did enjoy. Asia, of course, I'd loved for years, and this happens with Steely Dan. Sometimes I just get back into them and I keep listening to them. The year that I listen to them is really irrelevant, because they are one of those bands that never leave you, really. At number 3, Rock Steady again came back in a vengeance from No Doubt, and also at joint 3 was Heavier Things, which is the follow-up to Room for Squares by John Mayer, and I really enjoyed the singles on that. But the winner by a huge margin on 22 listens was the new album by Angelica Kidjo called Ayoya. 22 listens it's got, and by this time I'd fallen in love with virtually everything that she'd done. I'd gone back through her back catalogue and got some of her very early releases, and I really loved the artist and still do. Okay, so those are my offerings for 2000 through to 2004. and I'll be back with another video to close out the decade.